After cutting the binds on her wrists and ankles and removing the rag from her mouth, it was now drenched in blood, Liz had enough energy to sit up. Her hands were shaking vigorously while she clenched the shard of glass. Blood was running from the sides of her hands. The muscles in her fingers were locked. A voice rang through her head.
Do it.
The voice commanded.
Do it.
Sweat trickled down her back. Liz watched as the hand holding the shard moved closer and closer to her wrist. She pulled against her arm, but it was no use. The blade would reach her skin, and Liz wasn't confident that it would stop there. Finally, the blade reached her arm, but she felt no pain. She began to push. Hard. Blood gathered around where the blade made contact with the wrist, but the voice was silent. A new voice had taken its place. Hey! She froze.
James?
It was his voice, but he sounded younger? She looked around, and suddenly she was looking at her younger self, sitting on a sidewalk outside her house. It was so bright. Her face was wet and she was crying into her hands. There were several cuts, small and large, across both of her legs. Liz was looking at her younger self, who was looking towards James's voice. His hair was a lot longer than it was now, and his face was absent of fear and stress. Young Liz quickly put her arms over her legs to block them from the new boy's view.
Hello,
James said. He was younger. He had a red video game shirt on and shredded jeans.
why are you crying?
My daddy hurt me.
Liz answered and slowly revealed her legs to him. James looked down at Liz's wounds.
I will get you some bandages.
He said, and ran off. Liz watched him go and used the time to wipe her eyes. She began to pluck the pieces of glass that were still there out of her legs. It hurt like hell, but the stinging in her leg had stopped by the time James returned. He held a small medical kit, which he immediately opened and retrieved a small spray bottle from.
This hurts a lot.
He said while he looked directly into her eyes. Liz looked at his huge brown eyes while he sprayed the cleaner directly on the wound. She felt the familiar stinging pain, but did not react.
Wow, you're strong.
James declared.
Thank you.
James smiled. He was missing a tooth in the front. He grabbed the white fabric and covered the biggest cut and then wrapped it in gauze. He then handed Liz half the bandages in the box.
Help me cover up the rest of the small ones.
He said.
Okay.
The two worked in silence, Liz periodically removing small glass shards from the wounds.
Do you feel better?
He asked.
Yes, thank you.
What's your name?
My name is Elisabeth Parker.
Liz said shyly.
My name
James!
A girl called. Liz turned to see who it was. A little girl was running toward them. She was about James's height.
Hi, Amy.
Why did you run into the house and leave so fast?
My friend needed bandages.
Amy looked down at the girl on the ground, as if she just realized she was there. Her eyes looked at her for several moments before she spoke.
Hi,
She said shyly.
I'm Amelia.
I am Elisabeth.
This is my twin sister.
James specified, a smile wider than the one he wore moments ago on his face. Amy smiled and kept looking at Liz.
Elizabeth, do you want to eat with us?
James asked. Liz hesitated for a moment.
Sure.
Amy, go ask Mom if Liz can have dinner with us.
His sister complied and ran off. In her absence, James helped Liz up.
Liz?
She asked.
It is easier to say.
Can I call you Jay?
Liz asked teasingly, then her face became serious.
Thank you for helping me.
Sure and sure.
James said.
You could come to my house if your dad hurts you ever again.
Thank you.
Liz said.
Thank you for being here.
I am here. I will always be here.
It suddenly got very dark.
What? James?
Liz whipped her head around. She was alone. She was back in the dark, empty room. She had been squeezing the glass shard, tears running down her face. You aren't this dumb! Put the shard down! James's voice commanded. We're coming! Just hang on tight, please! Liz threw the shard. Thank you.
James, where?
A voice suddenly rang out.
What are you doing? Pick up the shard.
The voice had a slight accent that Liz couldn't quite place, and it sounded furious.
Who is there?
Pick up the shard!
No! No!
Liz slowly climbed to her feet.
How do you resist?
She didn't respond. She didn't understand what was going on. It was silent for several minutes, then the voice came again.
The memories were supposed to make you want death.
The voice said. Then it hesitated for several moments.
Ooh, this works much better. Stay alive until your little boyfriend gets here. It would hurt him a lot more to watch you die.
James is looking for me?
The woman didn't respond. While it made Liz feel better that someone was coming to help her, she wondered how James would even know where she was, let alone have the ability to break into whatever building this is. Liz calmly thought about her memory. Clearly, the memory had been planted so she would remember her dad. James, Amy, and Liz were all about 8 years old when Liz's dad cut her for the first time. That was how the trio met, and the next year, they had several classes together. Liz could hardly even remember not knowing James and Amy. She always had them. As long as she had them, nothing bad could happen.
Hey!
Liz screamed. Silence.
You can't kill me!
Silence. All she had was her heartbeat and a memory to keep her warm in the cold darkness of the room.